Okay, first, as sort of an introduction to the system, let me describe the parts of the system. Um, you know about the new speakers on the front wall.
Yes.
You have the speakers back here that cover the back part of the room. The relative adjustment between those speakers is all preset, and you don't have any control of that, so don't worry about that. There's also a subwoofer, which is behind the organ grill cloth up there. Subwoofer is just good for real deep bass sounds, bass guitars, and stuff like that. There are also your speakers out in the hallway. They're the same as they've ever been, except they're controlled a little bit differently. And before I forget it, we've set it up so that this is your loudness control for those speakers. And your friendly installation guy here is probably going to put a label over there saying hallway or something.
Artifacts.
Whatever. Yeah, whatever. But,
okay.
But so that way you can very easily just
Nice. Okay.
just turn it off when there's something going on here and you don't want to bother people out there. And sometimes you want it soft, sometimes you want it loud. So it's there for you to use. That's just a small detail. When you first come in, if you want to leave some of the equipment turned on because it's too much trouble to turn it off or whatever, it's okay. It's not going to hurt anything. But if you want to turn it off, there are different things to turn on and turn off. There's this control up here. And I'm not going to turn it off because he's doing something with something. Yeah. So anyway, there's a power switch here, and there's a power switch here, and there's a power switch on this rack down here. And for the system to operate, all of those have to be on. And then the console itself has a power switch, which is a rocker switch back here that you sort of feel and find. Theoretically, when you turn the console off, you're supposed to power it down sort of like a computer, you know, where a computer you say shut down, and this is similar, but if you turn it off, probably nothing bad is going to happen. To turn it off, you have to go to the setup menu here. We'll talk a lot more about this console here shortly. The setup menu, and then here where it says shut down.
Selected by pushing it.
And you press that, and it says, okay, now you can safely switch it off, sort of like a computer. Or if you change your mind, you can press home to continue, and you didn't shut it off. Okay, so that's sort of a detail. That's how you turn the system on and off. So at the sort of minimal operation level, what you have to do just to get things working is make sure that these things are on and this is on. And we're going to start out with real simple. You do that, and if it's a normal service, you come in here, and this is on C, and you press that 5 button. And let me show you what happens here. I should have done that.
Yeah, somebody else is in here and maybe changes the board. You could come in and just go back to that preset.
It's going to say load the scene. You got these cursors here. No, cancel. Yes, okay.
Went back to the
And
preset.
I'm back to my quote normal preset. So if nothing else happens and you come in here and you don't know how to work this board or whatnot, whoever is sort of in charge of keeping the board up to date with different talkers and different volumes and that sort of stuff should have saved whatever those recent changes are in our default scene, if you will, and C5 will recall that. So if you come in and you make sure it's on C and you press 5, you can have service.
What do you call those? Presets?
Presets or scenes.
They call them scenes inside of there.
Scenes.
Yeah.
I've heard that term in lighting controls.
Yep.
Yeah, and most of these control consoles are meant not only for churches but also for theaters.
Sure.
And most sound people think in terms of either music or theater.
Yeah.
Even if it's a church, let's face it, church is sort of a religious theater, right? It is a show,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yep.
And I don't mean that disrespectfully at all, but it is a show, and this is a show console, if you will. Do something here. I just say, change that symmetry. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the console itself. You're probably already familiar with the fact that you've got a lot of inputs up there, and you've got a lot of wireless microphones. So the job of this console is to take everything that comes into the console and to make it so it sounds good, and then send the signals out to the loudspeakers through all the equipment here so that it sounds like what you want it to sound like, which is, in general, good, clean, natural sound that people can hear. So that's sort of the purpose of what we're about. And in order to understand that, it's necessary to understand the functions of the board itself. It looks complicated, but it's very repetitive. So if you understand the basics of how to handle one input, one microphone, then you know how to handle 32 of them, because it's the same thing again and again.
Every channel is the same.
Right. So this console has 32 plus 6, actually it has 38 different inputs to it. And it's got a whole bunch of outputs. The outputs go to the main sound system. The outputs go to your
Radio feed.
to the radio feed, and to the recording, and to the fellowship hall, and to your hearing aids,
assist, yeah.
hearing assist. And yes, that does work. We just checked it. And what we're going to show you here is how to control the inputs and how to make sure they're going to the right place, and some tricks that you may or may not be interested in. So we'll just sort of take it slowly, and please stop me and say, what'd you say again? So with that, let's choose something here to use sort of as a demonstration tool. This is our blue microphone. Okay. Something's coming out. Okay, so where is the blue microphone? This is called a scribble strip. On the scribble strip, each one of these inputs is labeled with something. You may notice that for the inputs here, there are actually only 16 controls. These are volume controls, or we call them faders in the business. In an old style mixer, you'd have a rotary knob. These go up and down, but it's all the same function. So because there are only 16 here, those 16 can either be, and if you look at these labels over here, they can represent inputs number 1 through 16, or they can represent inputs 17 through 32.
Okay.
Or they can represent other inputs such as your CD player and your playback from the computer, for instance.
All right.
So after you've done it a couple of times, you'll already know where they are, but this obviously is the blue wireless. Okay, I don't see any blue wirelesses here. I see the guitar and this, that, and the other. So maybe it's on this layer, and indeed it is. And this right here says blue. And you notice that these scribble strips here are all the same color. That's because those are all these handheld wireless mics.
Does that include the pastor's mics?
Labeled here.
No, that's a headset. It's
The pastor's lavaliers are on
I
this.
just didn't realize we had that many. Oh, I didn't see those over there. I didn't realize we had that many
Yep.
wireless mics.
Nope. The pastors, there's says Pastor Jeff, and that says Pastor Becky.
Okay.
Right there. That's actually on the first layer, and it's not the same purple color because these are sort of the musical vocalists. But if we wanted that to be purple, guess what? We can change it.
that's okay.
Yeah, so, and that's a decision that anybody can make and change it. So if I go through here, you notice that our default scene, which I recall already has the volume up on these channels, and it's unmuted, so indeed, so if it's not set up very high, because probably anybody using this is going to be going, whoa, yeah, which is probably loud enough. But if you look, and as I talk into here, it's quite obvious, not only does it say blue here, but you see this meter here showing something. And so that's obviously that control. And if I want to make it louder, then I just simply make it louder here. And that works just fine. And if it's too loud, just bring it down one more. And once again, okay, I sort of lost track of what I'm doing. C5. Yes. And I'm back to go. So if you lose track, you can always recover. And indeed, if this is done properly, it should be so that if you come in and simply turn it on, other than the musicians maybe not being in perfect balance, the sermon, all the spoken word material, and at least some version of the music will come across and also go to the recording. So that's part of the security of having a digital board.
And one of the things that is different from this board compared to the analog board is when the mute button is pressed, that means it's muted. On our analog board, when it was pressed, it was unmuted.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you see it lit up, that means that it's muted.
Okay.
Yeah, this is logically done actually because not only does it say mute, but it's a red.
Yeah.
And so logically you think, okay, that's off.
Right.
Sometimes they're an on button to turn it on.
I know.
Sometimes how
Yeah.
it-
And you said that this automatically goes to the recording. There's nothing else you have to do other than just have the board up and functioning.
You just have to have the board up and functioning, and if you hear the sound coming out of the speakers, it's also going to the recording,
Okay.
is the short answer to that. So some of the channels, a fair number of the channels, we don't really know how loud they want to be right now, so they're stored in the off position. But as soon as they do a couple of rehearsals, maybe a couple of services, and get the feeling of how the band over here needs to be and whatnot, then all that'll be part of the setup as well.
And Pete, you know how to save all that to C5.
Pardon me. Okay, so
We will have different scene settings for first and second service.
Okay.
yes.
Different defaults for both, because they'll use different mic setups and stuff.
Okay.
We'll go through that procedure, but Pete's son knows how to store scenes in here and also how to program these buttons so that, for instance, 5 could be the first service and 6 could be the second service.
But for this Sunday, C5 will be for both, because I won't have time to do that before Sundays.
Yeah, exactly. So, and some adjustment is going to be necessary as well. Pardon.
We're going to have to get you some water.
Well, if it doesn't go away, then I'll take a break. And
I'll step in.
he can spell me. So let's talk a little bit more about what you can do with an individual input. And again, we're going to use this as an example. I'm going to raise it up a little bit just to show some of the bars. So this is your volume control that in the simplest version that's sufficient. There's another volume control up here where it says gain. Gain is just another word for volume. And just like on an analog board, this is the button that's sort of at the top of a strip where you adjust the strength of the signal coming into the board. It's also sometimes called a trim pot. And the way that most of us work that is, if we take a setup for a particular service, and let's just assume that we're going to use everything on this layer and everything on the next layer as well, I would like to know visually that it's all okay. So I want these to be straight across. But this is a soft person, this is a loud person, and so forth. So what you can do is you can go through here and you can adjust the trim here so that that is the correct volume regardless of this position. And that can be part of the scene. It can also be part of an individual show that's done in here. So this is one knob. These are 32 faders. So how do we do that? On an analog board, you would have 32 knobs.
Right.
Okay, well here,
Top of each channel.
here what you've got is every single one of these, including this microphone. That's the blue one. I could make that blue. Oh, I could have done that. I could make all these different colors to correspond to the mics. That would
You'd
be-
run out of no colors a lot faster than you have mics.
Yeah, that's my truth. Okay, so
Seems like
anything, this is blue. So what I have to do is I have to select the channel. And this is not to be confused with an on-off or a mute or anything else. This simply says, this is the channel I'm working on. So everything that you see up here pertains to that channel because I have it selected. So if I want to adjust the volume of this channel up here, I select it, and then if I want it louder, I can turn it up like so. Or if I want it softer, I can turn it down like that.
That's a lot easier than tracing across that road to find the right gain.
Oh, isn't it?
the other way.
Isn't it though? Isn't it? Yeah, so this is one of the things that if you're going to be somebody that operates the board more than just turning it on, you probably want to know. And that's all, you don't have to turn that on, it's just always there.
And what we had said in the previous one was that you're trying to get it to -9 on the meter, right?
That's a good target, -12, -9. Really, it's a matter of being consistent. And that leaves you a little room because you want to make sure you're not too loud. It's better to err on the side of a little too quiet
Yeah.
than a little too
Well,
loud.
yeah, let me turn this down so I don't do anything silly, but then I've still got that selected. I'm going to go up here and crank this wide open like that. Now, if I start talking like that, you see how it goes into the red?
Okay,
That means
yeah.
you're going to distort. So
Yeah.
that's too high. So
So that's the meter.
yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say, I
Yes.
didn't see the meter, I was looking over there for the meter. and
Well,
nothing's
there's-
changing on that screen.
Actually, if you look at this, there's a meter there, and it's the same meter here on the input. And because,
there it is on the
and because
side.
this screen pertains now to that input, the meter's also here. So, yeah.
And you got one on the screen too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the meters are useful, particularly to stay out of the red, but most of the time you're worrying about what you're hearing rather than what you're seeing.
It's more of like a sound check when you're
Yeah.
initially dialing things in. It's how you calibrate the loud talker
Sure.
who needs it turned down and the quiet talker who needs it turned up. You're arriving at the same place,
Yeah.
ending up at the same place.
So that's important button number one, we'll call it, that's the gain. Important button number two is what we call the low cut. And you have that on an analog console also. Sometimes it's labeled low cut, sometimes it's labeled high pass filter. And what that does is it restricts the frequency range of what gets to your loudspeakers. This is a system that not only has the full range loudspeakers, but also has the subwoofer. The subwoofer is just for bass guitars and kick drums and things like that. And if you try to put everything through the subwoofer, including all your vocal mics, you're likely to have a system that when you try to turn it up too loud, goes at you. So all of your vocal mics and all of the microphones that do not send the frequencies that subwoofers reproduce, all of those ought to have this low-cut filter engaged. For it to be engaged, it's got to be turned on, like so. And then this controller right here varies the frequency at which it operates. And right now I've got them all set about right for the vocal mics that I know about, but I don't know what mics in the band might be vocal mics. But
If it was mic and a drum, you would leave it or not?
A kick drum?
Kick drum.
Yeah, kick drum.
Okay.
I usually, by default, and I don't want to jump in here, is I usually have it applied to every single channel, with the exception of a kick drum, a bass guitar, an organ or a synthesizer kind of keyboard,
Okay.
CD player, something that truly has it in the music. If it's a voice, it doesn't have it. If it's a
Gotcha.
guitar,
Yeah.
it doesn't have it. And you want to reserve that low end for that, as well as keep it clean for the instruments that don't have it. So a voice, for example, when you push that in, you probably won't even hear a difference. But
Right.
it's keeping out all the garbage that's just not helping anything in that mic channel.
If you play back a music track and you say, oh,
Sounds a little flat
where's the
or not-
bass?
doesn't have any
Where's the
warmth
bass? Well,
to it.
that's probably because somebody did engage that
Yeah.
filter.
Right.
So it's important to have it in the right place, but not
Okay.
what done wrong. But if you like right now, the frequency of that is such that we got to cut off just such amount the voice still has some body to it. If just to illustrate, if I turned that all the way up
It's
here,
tinny.
then all of a sudden I sound a bit thin,
Yeah.
right? So
So that's going up in frequency then on the filter.
correct. Correct. Yeah, so it's got a pretty wide range.
If you leave it at about 100 and you're
Yeah.
going to go for a voice, you won't really even hear it come and go. But
Yeah.
it's still working. It's
Yeah.
still doing this thing of keeping the garbage out.
It's except
Good.
for 110 right now. If you've got somebody up there that can sing a real deep bass line, then you might want to take that and bend it down to a lower frequency. Clunk.
Hello.
Yeah, clunk. No harm, no foul, as they say. So that is in, which is proper for this microphone. So we're going to leave that. Throughout this console, when you see a button that says View, yeah, if you see a button that says View, if you press that button, then you get sort of a detailed picture over here as to what's being controlled. And in some cases, that's pretty important, and some it's not, but it's sort of an on-off button. It doesn't do anything except just change what you're looking at here. Okay, the next, we're not going to talk about dynamics because that's compressors. If you're interested in compressors or know what they're for, you don't need them in the system, so we're not going to talk about them. Not going to clutter up our minds with it. The same goes for a gate. That's something that's used in some types of music, and we don't need it here.
If we were setting up for Ed Sheeran or something, we might need to know that. Or Ken Chesney.
It's
Yeah.
one of those things where it's better to be not used than to be misused.
Okay.
It can do
Yeah.
more harm than good
Yeah.
if you're not using it right, so just better off
Don't
keep
use
it
it.
off the table for now.
Okay.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, the next section here, and you notice that these sections are sort of divided up with these borders. This is the equalizer section. It's a British manufacturer, so they spelled equalizer with S instead of a Z. So what? And this is the same as your EQ section on an analog board. In the same way where many analog boards have what they call a 4-band parametric, this also is a 4-band parametric. And I can view it again. There's a large picture.
Yeah.
And if you look at this, okay, this is right there is the effect of the
Filter.
right, the low filter or the high pass filter, and then this is a sort of a test filter that was put in, but it's not active because that's not pressed.
Will change colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Change
I
yellow
can see
Yeah,
light.
but I really don't want it in there anyway. So let's see, what would that be? That would be kind of the low mid. Yeah, that's the low mid. I'm gonna take that out. I don't want that anyway. Somebody might put it in.
This kind of illustrates well the fact that almost everything on here can be done in more than one way. You can, for these EQs, you can grab just do everything from those hard buttons, those hard knobs, and do everything from
Or you
there.
can do it all in
Or you can do it from here, or you can turn knobs there and watch it happen there. But it's a good illustration. That applies almost to everything on here, that there's more than one
Multiple
place
ways.
to do the same thing.
Yeah, a comment about the equalizer. This system has a permanent equalization applied in the stuff that you can't see, the digital processor it's called. And so for the vast majority of what you do in here, this is not going to be used. It is used only to compensate for somebody that has a voice that's lacking in diction, or a voice that's too bassy, or maybe a voice that doesn't have enough body down there. Some voices sound a lot better if you judiciously apply a bit of EQ to them. And what we say is that if you're going to want to do that, then you must have a good ear and some common sense. If you're lacking either one of those, please leave that alone. Very, very literally, because as in the case of what he just said, this is, you're more likely to do more harm than good if you don't know what you're doing with it. And you don't have to use it, but it's a tool. But if you're going to use the tool, you've got to turn on the EQ and then fiddle with all four of those filters as makes it sound better. And what we told the young man this afternoon, I'm sorry. Simon. What we told Simon was that depending on who's doing most of the talking, the pastors in particular, if they sound good on the system with current EQ, that's fine. If you think they could stand a bit of EQ, then the way to handle that generally is to come in here in an empty room, just whoever is working the board and the pastor, have them speak for a while, play with it. Oh, that sounds worse, that sounds better, and come up with something and then save it, rather than trying to do it on the fly. So there are various reasons for that. One is so that you don't interrupt the worship service. The other is just because it's sometimes sort of a sensitive thing. So, enough said about that.
Yep.
So click that out of there. Okay. So let's talk about a couple of tools which are sometimes pretty useful. Each channel has a mute button on it. So let's say the band stops playing. Well, you can do that and turn them all off, right? Okay. The console has something called a mute group. Some analog consoles also have mute groups, but on the digital board it's better somewhat. Down here where it says mute groups, lower right-hand corner, there's actually 6 of them, and you can have up to 6 mute groups. For instance, a mute group basically gives you the capability of taking any quantity of microphones. They don't have to be adjacent to each other, but any one of your 36 inputs, and grouping them so that with a touch of one button, it will turn those microphones on and off. So this is how you sort of kind of do it. Well, one thing you usually just press that button. See those mutes flashing on and off? Okay. And this was just a test, but it was set up with specifically those, just those 3. So how did I do that? All right. If you go up here to the menu, if you will, for this screen right here, there's one here that says mute groups. Okay, so that turns red. Now, let's say that I wanted to set up a mute group for, I don't know, what's very likely to happen?
Your bells, maybe?
Well, maybe
Turn off all the mics in the front, wireless mics,
all right.
except for the pastor and
Okay.
Pastor
So
Becky.
I'm
That's a
gonna do
real
that on
life.
Big Group 2 here. So I'm going to hold this down, and then I'm going to use these select buttons up here. And now I release this, and that's how I can check what's on that mute group. Okay, I'm done with this now, so I'm out of there. And now if I press this, they're muted.
Okay.
Okay, so that's off. And with a little label here, you could say this is the band, these are the vocalists, these are the pastors, these are the handbells,
Right.
whatever.
Choir.
Sort of pick a target. So let's take this just a step further than turning it on in the no operation mode. You can get people to turn it on and then Okay, you see these over here? Um, If it's red, it's off. If it's not red, it's on. This is the band, those are the vocalists, these are the pastors, whatnot. Okay, pay attention, and when that time of the service calls, just make sure that what's on what needs to be on is on, and what's doesn't need to be on is off. And this can greatly simplify your operation.
Absolutely.
Greatly simplify. So I'm going to now take this out of here. So how do you take things out of the mute group? Any
Probably
guesses?
choose mute group up there,
Okay,
hold in the button,
okay.
and hit the select keys that you want to take out.
See, you're already an operator. Yep, exactly so. So it's quite logical in a way. And after you do it a few times and that sticks in your head, it's pretty good. It becomes almost second nature.
No, they're still showing muted right now.
That's the blue one, and that's because that's on another,
No, these all are.
oh, are they? Oh, they are.
Well, just because you took it out of the group where they left, they were
'Cause
muted.
They
before,
were
so you
already
kinda
muted
took
because of the
gain
mute group.
control.
Okay. Oh, my.
What was that? Oh, those are the choir mics.
I was just a test.
Yeah, that's just a test. Don't pay
There's a
attention.
little bit of
Hearing that
feedback.
Those are
there.
the stick mics.
Don't pay attention to that man behind the green curtain.
I think there was some feedback.
Demonstrate that.
I think, oh yeah, what happened? Oh, that thing needs to come down.
Hey Pete, he's already taught me more than you did.
Well, I hope so. I was just trying
No.
you to get by for Sunday.
I've been doing
Although
this.
I do know how to set up labels and change the graphics for
Yep.
the different.
Yeah, I've been doing this a while.
Oh, you mean the colors? Did
Okay.
you say graphics?
Yeah.
The scribble strips.
All the scribble strips. I do all the. If you want a piano for a piano, or if you want a person with a mic. or-
Okay, pardon me while I resave my.
There's one that looks like
Still
crown.
around. Okay. Save,
Yeah, the congregation.
save.
When I first saw it, I thought it was
Okay.
like a cityscape.
That
or
one.
a
Right,
landscape.
yeah.
It's a laugh track.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the mute groups are quite useful. So the only mute group that's working right now is my first sample, which is still there. So let's go ahead and dispense with that. Yeah, so indeed, those are still muted because they were muted as part of this mute group. But now that mute group's empty. So the mute groups are a very useful tool. There's another tool which we showed this afternoon, but I'll show it to you anyway. Is in the same way that you can turn groups of microphones on and off, you can also control the volume of groups of microphones. And that's what's called a subgroup. We've been talking about inputs so far. These are outputs. And as is the case over here, we've got different layers with different types of inputs. We've got different layers here with different types of outputs. And the top one here is what are called groups, or DCAs, which is digitally controlled amplifier, if you care. But it's a group. This is a little bit, well, it's just different and may not be quite as intuitively useful as the mute groups, but it still can be useful. And the reason is as follows. If I take one of these DCAs, and there's 8 of them here, and assign a group of microphones to it, let's just say it's the band, then once I get the band level set over here like I want to, this can be the volume for them all at once in the same proportion. So how do we do that? Okay, it's a digital board, and we got 8 of these things, and there's only information up here for one, so it's sort of like the inputs in that. Okay, which one do I want to do? Well, I want to do the first one, so guess what, let's select it, except it won't select. That's because, well, the only thing that we really want to do is to group a bunch of these to this volume control. So let's just say that this is our band for a second. And indeed, this is sort of in the band area. There I go again. That band's dangerous.
They are.
You play in the band?
No, but I control their volume.
Ooh, you got the power. All right. Okay. Well, this gives you a different way of handling that power. So if I want to identify what is controlled with this group volume, I take the select button and I just hold it down, and sort of like I did here in say the mute groups, I use the select buttons to pick what is controlled. Power name, but I don't want that one. Okay. So I can now check and see what's on there. Now, the volume that I will hear is the volume which was set by me over here, modified by whether this goes down or up. There's nothing visible that's happening.
Yeah.
But if well, let me go back to my demonstration microphone here.
Nice if you've got someone singing a solo and the band is overpowering them.
Yes, that's exactly right. So if and notice that I can change this anytime I want to. I'm going to hold this down and add my blue microphone to it. Not mute, but select. Okay. So now, if I turn this microphone back on, check. Let's turn that up a bit so it's a little more noticeable. Now, because that's part of this DCA, if I bring this down, guess what happens? That comes down along with all the others that are selected. In the same way, if I increase that, it increases all at once. And
That's nice.
if you do that, you can also mute that, which is a different way of doing what we were doing with mute groups. So another way to teach people,
You're saying multiple ways.
yeah, if
That's even different from the.
if I were operating this board, I would use this because I've got control of the volume of those different groups, and I have mutes over here. But if somebody is not quite up to that part of the challenge, they could still do the muting over here once it's set up. Okay? Okay. And
So if we set up a DCA for maybe we got a special service going and I'm like, hey, this would be a good place to use that. It's okay to set one up because it's not going to be saved in the.
Oh, we can save it.
we'll get to
Okay.
saving scene here.
Ultimately, you can do just
very
about
shortly.
anything because the next service will get recalled back to the original safe one. So it liberates you a lot because
Yeah.
you can try something. You know what I mean? Obviously, you're in the moment, so it might be some danger, but you know.
Right.
It's
not,
nobody's got-
because I don't know what belongs in the DCAs, I'm going to go ahead and undo this one. You really can't tell looking at it unless you press these buttons what's in them. And there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing. That's the only one we've been playing with. So I'm going to remove that one and then go back to here. And those are all the ones I put in it. And it's just like the mute group thing where you sort of reverse course.
Select them.
Yeah. Or you can go back and recall your default scene. It does all automatically.
The one thing that I would mention, the caveat, that concern that I have with the DCAs is the way they're applied on this board, is that you, at a glance, you don't know how things are being changed. Things are happening in the background and you can't tell. So you could have your faders up and the DCAs down and you don't know why unless you've gone through and verified why this is there and that, this, that, the other. So if you're keeping track of things, it can be a good tool, but it could also be something that trips you up because you don't have the cross-reference of where things are going. It does have a meter on it, so you can still see things happen, but just a grain of salt if you're going to apply that.
Yeah, just so you know the quantity of it, if the VCAs are at 0, you see these faders all have a sort of 0 line going across
Yeah.
here. 0 basically means no change. If you assign VCAs and this is at 0, then nothing's going to happen unless you move this. And so in our default scene, we have all these set at 0, so you can go ahead and construct your DCAs. Okay, DCAs, that's good. Still talking about outputs. The DCA is sort of an output, it's sort of internal output control thing. Bus is the same as output. It's a bus is a path, if you will, for inputs to go to where they need to go.
On your analog mixer, it would be like your aux sound on a channel.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
just to relate
Yeah.
it to that.
Yeah. So in the business, sometimes we call these gazintas and we call these gazatas
Yep.
because it goes into the board and it goes out of the board. So those are all inputs and these are all outputs. But so buses 1 through 8. Okay, well, once again, there's 8 individual things here. And what are they? Well, that's on the scribble strip. And that one says monitor A, monitor B, monitor C, monitor D. And you're familiar with your monitors already, right? Okay. So, in other words, these are the master volumes going to your 4 monitor circuits. Okay.
So
So,
on your analog board, they would be the aux master.
Okay.
That might have
Yeah.
been your note.
yeah. Okay. So how do you figure out what's going to your monitors? Once it's set up, you're probably not going to have to fool with it a whole lot. Although sometimes musicians say, "Can't you give me any more monitor?" You've never had that comment, right?
No, I can't hear myself.
I can't hear myself. Woe is me.
That's when
We
you
need more
pretend to move
volume
it and
from
you
the
say,
band.
okay,
Need more
good enough.
volume
then.
from the singers.
Yeah, and another word about that in a minute. But let's take monitor A for example. So let me say, so if I follow the pattern of this board, if I want to send something to monitor A, I'm going to have to do what? I select it, right? Okay. Now, how do I pick which ones are going there or how much sound they are sending? And this is sort of cool, actually. Right here, see this button here that says fader flip? And down below that it says sends on fader, which is, I find it a confusing term, but it's common in the digital world. And what it means is that if I press that, you notice all this changed over here? That's because what I'm now seeing is the volume settings for each one of these inputs, which is going
that monitor.
to monitor A. And the same way, if I went to monitor B, it would be perhaps a different mix, and monitor C and monitor D. And these are sort of make-believe sayings because I really don't know what needs to go with monitors. But
This is a lot easier than the tracing on the old analog.
oh yeah. So if
Which one's going there?
Yeah.
so
Which
so
one's not?
yes, so monitor A, for instance, is feeding back to your vocalists.
Yep.
Right. So I would sort of think that if I go to the second layer here, it's not set up that way yet, but I would think that monitor A would probably want to have sound coming to it
Piano.
from, indeed, the vocalists so they can hear themselves.
Yes.
Monitor A is the vocal mics and the guitars. The monitor for guitars.
Okay, vocal mics, and they also want to hear the guitars?
Yep.
All right, so where are the guitars? Okay, there's Brian, and there's Dave, and there's the bass guitar. Maybe they want to hear the bass guitar. I don't know how good is he or she. So let's just guess maybe that those are the lines that are going to go to that monitor. You can control the amount of sound that goes to them from each one of those just by
Putting the slider appropriately.
just moving the slider appropriately, and that is your overall master. And if they want to A B it, you've got a mute there, which just mutes that monitor channel. A word about adjusting the volume on monitors. I sense that you've done this before. Okay. Okay, you've got a vocalist up there or an instrumentalist, whatever, and you're feeding them something and they say, I want more, I want more, I want more. Okay. You do that until one of two things happens. One is they say that's enough. The other is your ears tell you that what's coming out of your main speakers doesn't sound the same. And whichever one of those comes first, that's where you stop. You don't let them push the volume up to where it affects the sound out here, because you can't recover from that.
Or I just keep a finger on him. Is that good? They say fine.
You've been there before. You've been there before.
And
Absolutely.
I haven't moved the thing
Oh,
an
well, we
inch.
had one bass player many years ago that always.
You didn't hear that,
wanted
Pete.
more.
It's an old trick.
So, so I don't know where these volumes belong, but and yeah, the first service it might be a little bit of a struggle. If you can get the musicians in here for a sound check and work on their monitor sound for just a little bit and set the levels on that, that would be wonderful. If you can do it during rehearsal the first time, that would be even better. And when you're through the fader flip, you can turn that off. Now, another thing you can do with the fader flip is, if I select one of these over here instead, I'm still in fader flip. So, let's see. So I can now tell.
Can you tell which monitor is receiving?
So when you
Yes.
change the focus, when you
Yeah.
select an input, now you're saying, what are all the sends that I'm sending this one input to, rather than
Right.
so now you can say, well, I
Yeah.
want to send this to monitor A a lot and monitor B a little
Nice.
bit. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
you're kind of, instead of selecting the right side and sending from the left, now you're selecting a channel and then you're going to the right side and saying how much am I sending to the individual outputs.
yeah.
So it's a shift of focus.
Yeah.
So when you're through the fader flip, you need to get out of that. That's why it blinks, because it's important for it to not be
Yeah.
blinking under most circumstances, because you might be adjusting the volume on the wrong thing.
Keeping track of where you are on the digital board is one
Paramount.
caveat, and also keeping in mind what you have selected, that blues, because it's very easy to, I'm thinking about channel 1, so I'm going to grab this knob and do this thing. Well, it's not been selected, and you're adjusting something you don't even know what you're adjusting. So just that, a level of just being aware, and you get used to that as you go through it, but it's just the thing that can trip you up early on. Fortunately, since the scribble strips are so detailed with the
Yeah.
name and the colors, it used to be a thing where you get lost on what layer you were on,
Right.
but that's something that's easier to overcome now because of that, but still having something selected. Because the whole board, that whole upper section, only applies to the blue lit channel, and it's, you know, unless you're
Yeah.
keeping track of that, then you get lost.
So just for agreeance, we were on buses 1 through 8 here, and that's where your 4 monitor channels are on. Buses 9 through 16 have outputs going into your recording feed, and some other things as well. But they're sort of there and don't need to be fooled with, because that's all basically preset. The other thing which is important with the monitors is, and actually all of the outputs out of this board, they are what are called post fader. That means that if you have a microphone up here and it's going to the main speakers and to the hallway and to the recording, etc., and to your monitors, when you pull this down, they all go down. And most of us in the live sound business prefer it that way, because you don't really want to worry about whether you need to pull down another fader as well if you don't want something to happen. In the recording industry, it's a little bit different, but for our intents and purposes, everything's set as post fader.
What that does is it makes your bus, your mix layer, become an addition and subtraction to the main front of house mix per channel.
Right.
So that way, if you look at the record mix, which is 11 and 12, you'll notice everything is pretty much straight across the board, because we really want it to be the same. And then you might have an exception. We want to not have this at all. We want to have this a little bit more, but otherwise it's the front of house mix with a little cut twist on a few things. which is how your monitor mix will be, although you probably see have a lot more just yanked out off the right.
So we've talked about the inputs and we've talked about the outputs. Let's now talk about scenes a little bit. We talked about the fact that we've got a default scene in here right now. There's a capacity of 99 scenes in here. You probably don't have need for quite that many, which is good. Because this is, as we said, a sort of a theater console, they think in terms of show. And there's this little place over here that says show control. That's where you handle your scenes. You can also handle them up here by going to somewhere.
Set up library.
Yeah. No,
I think you do it. I honestly think, Richard, that you do it all from that view.
Maybe you do.
From the show control.
maybe, at any rate, there's a view button here. So if you want to deal with scenes other than just recalling our default scene or whatever else is programmed into these buttons, you hit view, and that brings up this little screen here. This is a list of all the scenes that are in there, and you notice that scene number 2 is labeled Start, if you can see that. That's the one that we've been sort of playing around with. And so let's just say that, okay, I have a different scene, and maybe we want to start, maybe you want to change start, whatever. But for this purpose, we're going to do some things around here. Doesn't matter because I can get back, right? I can always recover it as long as I don't erase that. Okay, so I want to store a new scene. Okay. I look across the button here. That says go, that says save. Save sounds, right? Go would be if you're recalling a scene. Save means obviously you're saving a scene. So I want to save it to where? Let's just say we're going to start scene 5, whatever. Save to scene 5, it says there. I push that. It invites me to put a name there. It's going to assume that I want to label it Start because that's what I labeled the last one for. I don't know, maybe I want to, this is a little bit clunky, but it's the way it is. Maybe Start 2. How about that? Okay, now it's labeled Start 2. Save. Oh, look, there it is. If I were to change something slightly and try to save something in that same place, which is number 5, save, it's going to say, do you want to overwrite
Because it knows you changed
or
something.
rename? No, I go that way, yes, go that way. So I've changed it. So that's how you change a scene. So, okay, so I just messed my board up and I saved it in a different scene. I want to go back to my start. I could press this magic button down here, but I can also just take this cursor and go up to start
Hit go.
and hit go. Are you sure? No or yes? Yes. And there I'm back. And you can do that for as many scenes as you want, and you can label what you want. I would guess that within some number of months, you might very well have a scene which is Thanksgiving. You might very well have a scene which is Christmas carols, whatever. And once you get that, then the next time you do a similar program, that gives you a wonderful starting place that you just vary according to what instruments you have, what vocalists you have, whatever. It'll make your life so much simpler than fooling around with an analog board.
Right.
When you do those special setups, you're going to start with one of your typical scenes.
Yeah,
And
you
then
never wanna
save
start
as
from
something
scratch.
else and augment it and supplement it and do those things.
Which brings us to record keeping. There's a USB slot here, which is useful for all kinds of things. One of the things which I need to do after we're finished sometime Sunday, whatever, is to get a USB memory stick and put in here and save the show file. And it'll prompt you probably how to do that, and then store that in 2 or 3 different places. If you then bring it back on a memory stick and insert it there, you can load it back into the console. So even if, heaven forbid, something happens to the board and it wipes itself clean, it's not going to happen, but if it did, or if somebody steals it and your insurance buys you new and you put it here, you can retrieve your file, stick it in, and in a couple of minutes, you're as good as new.
If you wanted to demonstrate it, I have a stick here you could use to save to.
I can try.
Sure.
I haven't done it yet.
Oh, okay.
But let's,
Well, there you go.
let's plug it in. I'm just going to go home, see if it comes up in the right screen or not. Some of these consoles come up in the right screen, and sometimes you have to tell them what to do. It looks to me like I have to tell it. It didn't automatically say what you want to do with it. So it's probably under setup. Do you remember?
Go to view on the record, right the view button that's next to the USB.
View.
Oh,
You
there.
up on top.
The view,
On the
yeah.
USB drive, there's the view.
Oh, no, I know where it was, Richard. Go to view on the show control, and then on the bottom, it says save or load from USB.
USB drive, save settings. Sometimes you have to hit this. There you can export just the scenes. But here you can save these settings. Okay. I can name it whatever I want. I've already got that saved.
Like if you wanted to go to your default and then just save that.
Select and save. Yes. Just select. I can create a folder. I can select which one I do. Guess I'm just going to do that. So I save. I've got both my scenes there. And the scenes control contain all the information for those 2 scenes. So in the same way, if I needed to, I can take the scenes that are on this stick and put that in and load them instead of saving them.
You guys something about seeing back up? How's it good feedback?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been playing around with it. Sometimes. Nice.
Thanks.
You can also, as I said, there's also a way to record directly onto that. If for instance, I don't think we should probably go into the details of it, but it's possible that if you have something in here that you're not recording on the computer, but somebody wants a recording on it, you could record directly onto USB. And there's a way through the menu here to select actually what you're recording. The simplest being just the same thing that comes on the speakers. If you have a public speaker that comes and gives some kind of presentation, and there's nobody in here to do that or whatever, you could stick in the USB and record it. It's a handy little thing.
So like if there's like a memorial service or something they wanted a recording of, you could just record it on a USB form.
Indeed. There's also a way that I haven't familiarized myself with that feature on this board. There's also a way to where if somebody came with a music that they wanted to play for that service, and I brought it on USB, is that okay? Well, actually it is okay, because you could shove it in there, and there is a way to play it back in the same way you would a CD.
Yeah.
In fact, it shows up on the aux layer as 7 and 8 on the aux layer, I believe.
Nice.
Okay.
I haven't gone through it. I would have to check the manual, but that's pretty slick.
A couple of sort of details. One, we mentioned that the assisted listening does work. If it's coming out of the speakers, it's going over that. If it's not coming out of the speakers, it's not going over that.
Just for point of reference, that's the transmitter right there, and there's a little meter on it, so you can see stuff happening on there as the sound goes out.
Yeah. Another point of interest, the hanging microphones that have been there for quite some time, those don't come through the speakers. Because if you try to put them through the speakers, they just result in feedback. So they are in here, but they go directly to the radio without coming over the speakers, and all that's preset. So you don't really need to get into that.
So that's a pre-mix send out or whatever.
It's
ahead of the
post fader. We've literally taken it off the left, right, and bus.
Okay.
So it still operates like every other channel, but
Okay.
it will never make it there because we've deselected it.
But if we're
on
in,
the channel.
if I'm listening, where would I still adjust?
It's still treated the same way that you normally. I would just say have it up at Unity, and you're going to leave it
Okay.
alone on the main fader, and then you would go to change things. You would go to bus 11 and 12, which is where our record mix is happening, and then you can vary how much it is
Okay.
in the record mix from there.
Okay.
That's these buses, 11 and 12, they're labeled feed, just because they feed lots of stuff.
For simplicity's sake, we've basically created that stereo pair to be the record to the record audio, to record video, to send to the radio, and to send to the fellowship hall. Once you leave the room, it's all the same mix.
Yeah.
So for simplicity's sake, it's always going to be the same thing.
Right.
And for that point, you want to leave the master the same place because we're hitting all these other locations. If it's a little too loud for this recorder, dial it back there, or from the sources. But otherwise, there's a balance that's already been established externally. But for the most part, it's gonna probably be set and forget.
Yeah,
You're probably going to decide what belongs there and what doesn't, and then you're not going to.
Yeah, if I go back to those recording buses and go through that fader flip that we were doing before, here's a select and then the fader flip, you notice that all of the inputs going to that and also to this are set at the same level. If it turns out that on your recording you want more of your suspended microphones, they're called choir left and choir right. And you can,
Nope, those are the
Nope.
stick microphones.
Oh,
One's a stick
man.
wireless.
That's
So go to
right.
the aux layer, and
That's
that's
right.
where the hanging mics are.
That's right. Hanging mics,
And
those,
feel
they're
free to
already
change
elevated.
those. Those are
Yes, it actually says hanging mic. They're coming in the aux layer instead of the other layers. Yeah, I get confused between choir and hanging.
Yeah, and that's where again
Yeah.
you guys got to make what's going to make the most sense to you. The other thing is them being out of the way is probably a good thing because
Yeah.
you're not going to juggle them on a daily, on a regular basis. So being on that layer. is really good.
Once they're set, they're set. That being said, if for whatever reason somebody says, well, I don't really want those on during the sermon because the sound isn't as clear on the recording, you can either go there and mute those two channels, or you could program off a mute group that says hanging microphones on and off,
Yeah.
and realize that that's just for the recording. The problem with doing that, of course, is that every time you add another on-off, then that's something that's going to get misused occasionally.
Right.
You mute it, and then you forget to unmute it.
How's the organ? Is the organ into this board or is it?
Organ's completely separate.
Okay.
That being said, the microphones that are up there cannot discriminate between an organ sound and a preacher.
Okay.
The hanging mics were how we were miking the.
Yeah, that's what I remember on we had it labeled. These had to be up if it was 9 o'clock service. So
Right.
Organ and congregation.
That's what the hanging mic's purpose
And that
is.
that was before you had the left and right that I think was added when you came.
Yep.
Was that for recording purposes or amplification of the organ?
I don't know. I think it was
I
so you
think
could
it's
hear
for
it.
recording purposes.
Going to the radio.
It's going to the radio. It's a radio feed.
Yeah, that makes sense,
It was
because the
only
organ
for-
probably fills up the room by itself. I would
It
think.
does.
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah, you know,
11 and 12 work
That's right, it was-
together.
It was for the radio.
So
9
you
o'clock
can't,
service.
you could probably force it, but you'll break the board if you try to make
You know
11
what, I
and 12.
undid it earlier.
Oh,
and
you-
I'll
they're
show
not
you
linked
how-
anymore?
The only reason I did that is because it was doing some weird things. I'm gonna put it back because what it'll do is make it so that one adjustment will apply to both of them. I'm just gonna, so now they're linked together.
So now if I go
Thank you,
to,
Richard. I gotta go.
You bet, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, we're just about done anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for your
You-
questions
You
and.
tripled my knowledge.
Good. Well,
And that's no slam on Pete.
well,
Oh, I wasn't trying to do
that
it.
Sunday.
I hope sincerely that you remember more than,
Which one's
more than half of it tomorrow.
Lawrence, so you're in Toledo or?
Because it's a lot to absorb.
So like,
But
so his
the,
design and we.
as I was saying this afternoon, to use this board as it deserves to be used for the purpose of worship here, it's necessary to approach it in sort of a playful mode. Don't be afraid to play with it. Probably not during service, but at other times, come in here, just have a blast and see what it does, because you know you can always get back to code. Don't worry about screwing it up. If it goes into feedback, turn down the volume and figure out what's going on. Yeah, come in and play with it. Get a microphone and see what the controls do. You know, see if you can route a microphone to a monitor speaker. It's just there to play with.
Definitely get your hands dirty. It's the best way to kind of take the ball and run with it a little bit. And I always say a digital mixer is both simpler to use than an analog mixer because one button press and you've got a preset happening. But it's also obviously way more sophisticated. But it's liberating because you can mess with it all you want and then hit a button and you're right back to the way that you were before. So it kind of takes the danger out of it a little bit.
It's a digital mud puddle.
There you go. Clear as mud.
So those are sort of the basics of it. The board also has capability of adding reverb and various effects if certain types of music want it, but probably that's for another day to figure out.
Let me turn that light off. Turn the switch behind you. Okay. I was just curious as to how readable the strip was with that light off.
Yes,
and you
it's
can
not-
adjust the intensity of the scribble strips, the lighting on it.
But no, it's not bad. I mean, you've got to be right above them because
It's the angle that you look at it. Yeah.
But you can adjust the background and the foreground intensity on the scribble strips. So
Is that a global control on this board, or is it per channel?
I think it's global. Well,
I would think it would be global. I would think it would be across the, you
Yeah.
need to set up your lighting environment. One thing that we came across when we were setting colors is on there is that, so for example, we set magenta to all of the wireless microphones.
Right.
And Richard wanted to change the headset mic to something different. There's an invert button, and what it does is it takes the foreground color and the background color and flips them. So it's still magenta, but it's more like the text is now the light color and the background is the dark color as opposed to the other way. That way it's still, I don't know, it doubles the amount of colors you have in a way,
Yeah.
you know.
it's a nice little feature.
Yeah.
Under setup here, there's you page over till it says scribble strip, and that's where you can label them and change the colors.
Okay.
And it's sort of an intuitive menu here, but it's a little bit awkward with the naming, but like you notice that has a guitar and that has a guitar, and they got little logos that you can put that look like microphones or snare drums.
I would
or
stay away from the
toms or-
snippets because it'll automatically rename. But the colors are valuable, the icons are valuable. I would probably avoid the snippets though, and then you can go into name and give it a custom name if you want to do that.
Which we did here because it says Dave guitar and whatnot.
Yeah.
And,
Easier to control.
yeah, and there's nothing wrong if you want something larger with taking a piece of masking tape and
Well,
Sharpie,
the
just like
value
you would
of that too
picture.
is that if your Christmas event is dramatically different from your daily event, you might want different labels on there. You might have a different color arrangement if you're going to have something dramatically different from one scene to the next. So channel 16 might be blue in one, and green in another.
Yeah.
If this rack down here is off when you come in, after you power it up, it's going to take 2 or 3 minutes to boot up entirely. And until it does that, you're not going to get any sound out of the system.
Okay.
So don't expect to do it at the very last minute.
So if everything's off, is there any particular order that you need to turn things on?
It's not a safety issue, but this makes a thump when it's turned on. So normally what you do is you always turn the mixer on first and then everything else.
Okay.
And you reverse the process. You turn off the amplifier so that nothing comes over the speakers before you turn off the mixer. It's the way that is customary through all sound systems. But if you don't do that and it thumps, so what?
It's annoying, but it doesn't.
It's not going to break anything.
You kind of, it's more when you turn things off, is it gonna matter more? Because when you go to turn things on, this takes so long to boot up that it really, you could start that and do everything. It's really when you turn stuff, if you're gonna turn stuff off, you probably wanna turn that rack off first, if you're gonna turn it off at all.
Okay. But
Otherwise,
it's not going to affect its use once everything's on?
right.
Okay.
And if you were to turn that off now, you would hear it go thump, and that'd be the
Yeah.
end of it, and everything would be
Well,
fine.
like the old analog board thumb.
And these things can stay on forever. We run paging systems that's in hospitals on these same types of devices, so they stay on 24/7, 365 days a year for years on end.
And
So.
we don't have to worry about them getting overheated?
Nope. They should be good.
Well, you normally don't have problems with audio equipment today, with the exception of some power amplifiers, but nothing in the system is going to overheat.
We're not pushing anything near its limits, and these things generally, they get to a stable temperature and then they stay there and they're just happier being stable at that temperature than cooling and heating and cooling and heating.
No, if you were in the Arizona desert and your air conditioning broke, I might think about that twice, but no. It's not going to be a problem. in
And they
Ohio.
also had safety features built in. They're not going to let themselves self-destruct. They'll shut down before they get to that.
No, the equipment that you have here is quite high quality, and you should be able to expect that this stuff is going to last you for quite a number of years to come without problem.
So the same platform, Huntington Center in Toledo, we run the same platform over there for them. Hospital paging, multiple hospitals we have this running in, so we rely on this for mission critical for lots of stuff, and this is obviously mission critical for you guys.
Okay.
So, Eric, like I say, have fun with it.